Alright guys, welcome back to Highlander Hunting. Whether you are a beginner or expert hunter, our goal is to provide you with the helpful information on backcountry hunting on public lands. I'm Mike McRae.
And I'm John McCann, and tonight we have a special guest with us, is a local guy named Chris Maxwell. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, guys.
Glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And you might recognize Chris's voice. He's been on a couple of other podcasts. He's been on the J. Scott Outdoors podcast and the Hunt Backcountry podcast, both from the United States. And Chris is he's a sheep hunter. He's on the board for the Wild Sheep Foundation here in Alberta, working on his Grand Slam. He's been on a lot of cool guided hunts, and yeah, he's just a great resource of information on sheep and sheep hunting. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me over. It's always good to get together with local guys that like doing the same thing you do. So.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. Right on. So we're kind of gearing this whole podcast towards the new sheep hunter. So someone that's kind of going into it completely blind. Maybe they don't even have the right equipment yet. But so we're going to be just kind of trying to stay into basics tonight. So as far as the actual sheep itself, like what can you tell us about the sheep, where they like to hang out, and maybe just their biology?
Yeah. So I guess the first question every new sheep hunter always asks is, well, where do I find them? And that really is the secret. Where do you find them?
Yeah.
The habitat really that you're going to be looking for is going to be big grassy meadows near the top of mountains with some kind of escape terrain. So some cliffs or somewhere they can jump up on and get away from predators, essentially. And that's going to be true in anywhere you find sheep. That's going to have that kind of a similar characteristic. You won't find them typically wandering through the forest, although you do see the odd picture of like rams in the trees, or they do cross valleys to get to another mountain range, but typically that's not where you're going to be as a hunter going to be able to find them. So
They're eating grass then? That's their main diet, is grass?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if they eat browse at all. I don't think I've ever seen them eat browse. I think it's pretty much just grazing.
Okay.
And we heard about the lichens too, that you can eat off the rocks. And I was reading one article, and they were actually talking about getting addicted to it.
Oh, really?
And have you?
I hadn't heard that. No, I hadn't heard the lichen, but it would make sense if they did eat it. It's high protein, I guess. And, but yeah, no, I hadn't heard that. I haven't really seen a whole lot of lichen where I've hunted sheep that they would like the thick stuff that the caribou eat. I haven't seen really a whole lot of that kind of substantial amount of lichen in sheep country, but
okay. And then now, what about the rut dates? Like all the other different animals, we kind of have our favorite sets of dates. We like to go after them. When do they rut, and when is your favorite time to hunt sheep?
So for the sheep rut, I'm going to say 99.9% of us are going to be out of luck for that, because it typically happens in November after season's closed. So if you want to hunt a sheep in the rut, it's basically you're going to have to draw one of the special permits, which is, you probably have a better chance of winning the lottery than getting that. So, but they're typically in November, and if you ever did get the rut permit or a tag that you could hunt during the rut, that would be significantly easier than any other time of the year. I've seen fairly good sized rams on the road with ewes during November and stuff, and you'd never see that any other time of the year. So
no, for sure.
So I started scouting in the summertime there in June and July, and I've had no trouble glassing up ewes, and they've been up pretty high in basins and stuff like that. But rams, the only time I spotted rams outside of a park was with Mike, and Mike spotted them first. Yeah, so they're not together at all for the rest of the year. They only come together for the rut, and then they're apart again? Or?
So I've actually have put a substantial number of trail cameras up in the top of the mountains on several places, and kind of what I was trying to do is figure out where the rams were at different times of year.
Okay.
And now I started tracking one ram, and I found him like 30 kilometers apart. So I was like
30 kilometers apart.
Yeah, and I wasn't even looking for him on my other trail camera. I happened to have he had a pretty unique chip out of his horn and a unique broom on the one side, so I knew it was the same. For sure, it was the same ram.
Yeah.
So they travel a long ways.
So what kind of time difference are you talking, like between?
Oh, it was like from the first picture was in May and the second one was in September.
So not even during the rut?
No, it was just average, just off season for the sheep basically. But the only thing you're going to see with the ewes and lambs consistently the ewes are their lambs and immature rams.
Okay.
That I've found anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the odd immature ram, like 4-year-old, might be legal with a lamb tip. And you do see the odd one of those get shot, and it's guys finding them with ewes.
With ewes.
And they just happen to be legal, but you really shouldn't shoot something like that.
No.
Whether it's legal by length or not, you really want to look for those older rams. And I know it's tough when you've never taken a ram before to say lay off the trigger, but like I myself personally even could have taken 2 before I took the one I did. But I just felt they were too young, and since you can buy an over-the-counter tag, why take a young one, I guess. But my personal preference is to try to get at least an 8-year-old, if possible, or better. Preferably in that 10-year-old range is like my goal, I guess. But
so for a new sheep hunter, like when you're saying an 8-year-old, so a 4/5 girl ram would typically be, it could be younger than 8?
Yeah.
But typically, would it be around 8? Or
4/5, you're going to be looking at it probably at least, like assuming it's not broomed, probably 6-7 is a good estimate. If they've got a bit of brooming, or depending on the genetics, it could be older. Yeah, they're starting to get a bit of age on them once they get to that 4/5, but you gotta look to see what the lamb tips are like, because I think it was even in Alberta Outdoorsman. There's a picture of a legal ram, and I think they said it was only 4 years old.
Really?
So it was quite young. It just had fast-growing horns on it, and it was probably in the area with good feed and stuff.
So maybe for some of our new listeners and new sheep hunters, maybe just explain when you refer to them as broomed.
So brooming is, it happens either when they're fighting or they're hitting rocks or rubbing on rocks, and the horn tips get busted or worn back. So if you see a ram that's heavily broomed and has a lot of mass, he's typically a little older. The younger ones will keep their lamb tips, and the theory is they'll broom or knock their tips off their horns off once it starts impeding their vision. But it can happen from fighting and whatnot as well. So
sometimes they're doing it on purpose then.
Yeah. And if you watch sheep enough, like if you can find some rams and watch them long enough, you'll see them kind of screwing around and rubbing them on rocks, and they'll be butting heads, establishing dominance basically all year round. So might not be as intense as like when they're rutting, but they'll be knocking horns once in a while. So.
And I imagine you've hunted several different places in Alberta.
Yeah.
And have you noticed that the different areas have kind of different genetics and different looking sheep?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like, I guess more guys would be familiar with hunting deer, but it's kind of like if you hunt deer in northern Alberta versus the prairies versus Saskatchewan. Like if you got your spots and you hunt them enough, you can definitely tell, oh, this rack came from this area, or this rack probably came from that area, if you're familiar with the genetics. So yeah, I've hunted the Wilmore and central Alberta and southern Alberta there, and you can definitely tell the difference.
What's it like up in the Wilmore?
That's pretty cool place.
Is it?
Yeah, it's big country though. My friend and I went in with backpack style, and I wouldn't recommend it backpacking unless you're in pretty good condition, and like we were doing it when we were in our mid-20s, so we had a lot more energy than brains, I guess. But if you're in really good shape and can carry the weight and are willing to hike a long ways, it's a good place to go. So.
The pictures I've seen, it looks pretty amazing.
It's pretty awesome. Nice. Yeah, up there, and I've only been up there the one time with my buddy, but I've always wanted to go back since.
And how do you find the sheep there in the Wilmore compared to the more southern sheep?
They're quite a bit smaller.
Okay.
Yeah, body wise and horn wise. So my friend actually took a 10-year-old ram up there 1 year. It was broomed and looked like in the pictures, it looked absolutely amazing. and I seen it on his wall, and I was like, holy cow, this looks like a midget sheep. It's just like, it was a beautiful ram. I would have taken it any day of the week, but they are substantially
It's like
smaller.
a sheep, only smaller.
Yeah, and I think they call the Wilmore like subarctic or something like that too. So
really,
I don't know if I think that's what I've heard. So it's probably a shorter growing season for them and harder winter, probably, I'm assuming. So
okay,
but here in Alberta, we just got the one species, right? Like,
yeah,
we just got the Rocky Mountain.
It's just the Rocky Mountain. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So it's all the same species. It's just I'll assume they're genetically, different, like the same sheep, but just like there's probably like a little
Better feed or whatever.
Genetically a different population than say the ones down by Waterton or whatnot. But they're all same species.
Species.
And then maybe we should just talk about too, like how does their life cycle go with when they start to breed and when they stop breeding, and then usually those are the ones that we want to target, right?
Yeah. So and actually, I had a good discussion with Jay Scott on this actually and it was surrounding aging, but I think it's kind of relevant with the breeding. And when he ages a ram, he starts at what he calls the 4th year growth ring. And what that is on the 4th year, that ring is predominantly significantly darker than the first 3. And I never really noticed that before till they started talking about it. And another pretty prolific sheep hunter from BC was talking to me about it once too. So it's something, I guess, that's known as this 4th year ring, and then he counts back towards the base from there to age it. But so that the theory is, anyways, that on the 4th year is when they start breeding, so it creates more stress. So that ring is actually darker. And if you look at your ram on the wall, you might be able to tell. So that 4th year, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, those rings will be quite a bit darker than the first 3.
Okay.
Yeah, and I went and checked all my sheep at home after the first time I had ever heard that, and that was true on all of them.
I hope one day I can say that all my sheep at home.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
How many sheep do you have up at home?
I got 3.
Nice. Good job.
So
that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a lot of work.
Yeah.
So maybe we can now talk about kind of hunting in Alberta. And I think we're kind of the rarity here. Like, we were down in the States for the summer, and I was talking to a guy in Wyoming about hunting sheep. And like, he could not believe that we buy a over-the-counter tag and are able to hunt bighorns. So I think we're pretty lucky here.
Yeah.
So maybe if you can just talk about maybe how it works here, and maybe go into the U draw, and then you've already mentioned a little bit about the late season draw, but maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So here you can buy an over-the-counter tag and basically any unit. There's a handful that are draw, but for the most part, like 90+% are over-the-counter tags. Obviously, some are better than others. Like, some units are more likely to find something than others, but there's a potential in all of them. Then there is a draw for Catamount, which is kind of the holy grail of draws, or used to be anyways. But I can't remember what the odds were now. It's like, I want to say 1 in 5,000, but I can't remember if that's the number. It's astronomical, though. Chances are you're not going to get a tag there. But and then 444-446 is a draw, and that's just north of the Wilmore, and there's some mines up there. And the sheep aren't huge, but the attraction to that one is because of the mines. There's actually a road that goes way up into the mountain there, so it takes a lot of work out if you're just looking to kill something. But and then 410, which is another unit that's got a famous archery zone by Canmore, and that one's on draw, and that's a pretty high priority draw as well. But guys like Fred Bear have hunted it, and
have you ever hunted 410, just out of curiosity?
I haven't. I used to do a lot of archery hunting when I was younger, but just I haven't had time in recent years to stay proficient with it, so I haven't put in for that unit. And then I can't remember if it's 406 or 408. One of the K country zones anyways got a late season draw.
Oh, that's 408. I was checking that earlier. Yeah. So that's November. It's just November, I think.
Yeah,
for archery.
For archery, and I think the regular season's over the counter, but the archery, like all the big rams start coming out during that archery. So that's kind of a cool draw too if you can pull it. But I think that one's like 20. I don't know. I don't want to say 20 years, but it's way up there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you have any idea how many rams are killed legally in Alberta every year?
Yeah, there's about 200. I want to say, is it 200 a year roughly?
How many tags do you know?
Over 2,000.
Okay. So.
Yeah, and lots of guys buy tags whether they go out or not.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys buy tags and only go out for a weekend. So, there's some spots that you can basically see sheep from the parking lot. You're probably not going to find a legal ram there, but guys buy a tag and go out for a weekend, and if they find something, great, and if not, oh well. So, I'm speculating, but I would guess there's probably 500 serious local sheep hunters that go out that are really putting a lot of effort and planning into it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just my guess, based on guys I've talked to and stuff. So there's definitely a lot of guys buying tags just planning to go out for a couple of days.
Okay.
Well, and it seems like the sheep hunting is one of those things that gets into people's blood too. Like probably not everybody, but it seems like there's a very dedicated core group of people that are
for sure. Yeah. I always tell first-time sheep hunters this will either be the first sheep hunt or your last. So and the first one I went on was a absolute disaster, and the guy that I was hunting with there, he was supposed to be I thought he was more knowledgeable than he was anyway, but he had hunted him a bit, and he ended up falling and scraping his leg pretty bad, and then actually ended up in this creek upside down. I had to pull him out and get him out of the bush or whatever. But and then he ended up with I'm not sure some kind of infection in his leg anyway. So he was actually on antibiotics, IV antibiotics, and laid up at home for a while after that. But it was the toughest thing I'd ever done, and I was like, okay, now I got to figure this out. This isn't like going deer hunting or whatever, where you're pretty much going to get something if you go out for a few days. It's going to be like a lot more effort and work than I was originally anticipating, and it's just kind of hooked me.
Okay, so
from that,
from the newbie's point of view, I hear people like you just said, it's a lot more work. Like, so specifics. What is it? The elevation? Is it just is the weather?
Well, the elevation, the weather, you can experience that if you're elk hunting probably, but it's just the big ones, knowing where to go and where to look and how to look. What I found with a lot of guys that don't hunt mountain animals is they don't know how to glass in the mountains. So glassing for a deer is way different than glassing for a sheep or for other mountain game. So for mountain game, what I like to do is go to a likely spot, set up, and just glass. And if you take a look, you're there for an hour and you don't see anything, well, that's just means you haven't found it. Like, they're there. You just have to keep looking. And I remember the one time I was on top of this mountain and we'd been there, I don't know, 3-4 hours. Hadn't seen a flicker of anything. And I was pretty much ready to move on and try somewhere else. And guys with said, no, let's stay here. They're here. We just got to figure out where they are. And an hour later, they stood up, and we had been looking straight at them for the whole time pretty much, but we just couldn't pick them out of the rocks. And then after one stood up, all of a sudden we seen 20. So they're there. The game's there. It's just you got to be patient. You got to glass, and you just got to look for things like a twitch of an ear or tip of a horn.
You kind of got to get an eye for it, I found too.
Yeah, exactly. So that was I probably wasted the first 5 seasons. I don't want to say wasted. I probably took the first 5 seasons to start picking up on that kind of stuff. And then once you, like you say, start getting an eye for it, then there's one. Then, that's a likely spot. And you start looking for them in places that I'm going to say like a non-mountain hunter wouldn't probably think to really pick apart and stuff. So it's quite a bit. I found the glassing to be the biggest learning curve. And then the other thing for work is I wasn't used to carrying a 50-pound backpack around. So the first couple trips I went in when it was, my conditioning definitely wasn't there to be packing a 50-pound pack for 8 hours in one way or whatnot. So that was the big thing. And then just, having to carry your food, your camp, your whatever else you're bringing with you. And, you're doing the whole 9 yards when you're going for sheep on your own and stuff. So
I learned too, when the first few years we were out, I had pretty crappy gear. Actually, I think the binoculars I was using for straight out of 1970 that my dad had loaned me that I've been using for years. And I was out with my buddy who actually had a high-end or higher-end quality binoculars that his buddy had lent him.
Yeah.
And we were doing the same thing you're saying. We were scouring the mountainside and I was using these old crappy binoculars. Hadn't seen anything for hours. And Lauren, my buddy, he goes, "Here, why don't you try these binoculars? Have you looked through these yet?" And I said, "Nope." And literally, I raised them to the mountain. I'm like, there they are. Yeah. They just instant. And it was a huge difference between the bottom of the barrel 1970s binoculars and something decent.
Yeah, and I started out the same way. I had I had this whole Tasco set of binoculars, and I spent my money on a good rifle scope and this and that, but the binoculars or the spotting scope are if you're going to spend money on anything, that's the first two things to get if you're planning on doing any amount of sheep hunting is the glass.
Yeah.
I've once heard a guy said if I had $1,000 to spend on a rifle, I'd spend $700 or $800 on the scope and $100 on the gun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty accurate when you're talking about finding them, because if you can't find them, you can't hunt them.
Yeah.
So you're glassing a slope, let's say.
Yeah.
Are you using a scope the whole time? Like, are you scanning with your scope, or are you scanning with the binos and using the scope to verify or to
that's a good question. So that it all depends on how narrow the canyon we're in is, or the mountain range. So if we're in a couple of the canyons I hunted, we're in a pretty tight canyon, so it really wasn't that far across, and I was using my spotting scope and I just found it was too hard.
You're looking in a tunnel.
So I used binoculars, and I typically just have a 10 power binocular, and then what I do is go top to bottom and sweep like left to right and just kind of do that sweeping, and then I'll start at the bottom and same thing and move up, and then some guys like to go up to down and then like left to right, like up to down and then move left to right. But I've always found just going left to right and working your way slowly down seems to be the most effective for myself anyways. So
good deal.
So when you're looking at a slope there, and then there's a line where it seems like the vegetation stops.
Yeah.
Are you glassing above that, and how much above that would you be glassing?
It all depends. So I've seen rams at the very peak of a mountain, very, very peak. And then I've seen them midway through that rock band, and I've actually I saw a ram once. I wanted to get a better look at him, so I was kind of crossing this rock band, and a sheep actually jumped out of a cave that was hidden from just the way the rock crops were out from right behind me, kind of halfway up those rocks. So yeah, and just thinking of other times I've seen them found them bedded down in the rocks too, but typically in that escape terrain they'll be usually bedded up somewhere in there. I don't think I've ever seen one bedded down for the night in the middle of the grass.
Okay.
Or staying there. Like you'll see
because they've got predators up there too.
Yeah. I've seen grizzly bears crawling around where the mountain goats were before on the cliffs and stuff. So I never thought a grizz would ever be up there, but I've actually seen them climbing around with the mountain goats and whatnot, trying to
looking for a little goat sandwich.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it. I never dreamt a grizzly would go that high, but yeah, there's goats, and then some areas there's mountain lions that'll target sheep too, and those lions are pretty deadly on them. Like they'll clean out the herd of them off a basin over a winter and stuff. So
John and I, last time we were kind of talking about just your perspective when you're out hunting. Mm-hmm. So for the new guy going out in the field, if there's an area that someone wants to check out, how do you like to scout? Like, are you in the valleys looking up to the mountains, or do you like to get into a high spot and look down?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it really depends on the for myself anyway, like the thickness of the valley floor. So like I'm gonna say 9 out of 10 drainages in Alberta, at least in mid to southern Alberta, are gonna be pretty heavily timbered until you start getting up to elevation, can get out of that timberline. Just we haven't had a lot of uncontrolled fires in a lot of the sheep country and stuff. So what I like to do here anyways is kind of get to a higher vantage point above the tree line and just get tucked in where you can see most of the area that you think they're going to be in, and just kind of get a real good look around in there. I have been in places where the valley floor has been a little thinner and stuff, and if that's the case, it's like I'm perfectly happy being on the bottom looking up and into the cliffs and whatnot. But it seems like most of the places I've been in Alberta here, you've got to get above the tree line to really get a good look at things. So how about yourself? Have you what?
Well, we were just talking about it, and like a lot of the sheep that I've seen in the past, it's some of them from the valley you actually wouldn't see because like they're up on a ledge where there's a bit of a flat spot and they can be bedded down there.
Yeah.
But sometimes just for me, like just hiking up 5 minutes up the opposing hill, completely changes your perspective and you can see that much more. So when we're out and about, like when we were up the other day, like sometimes it's good just bouncing up and down the hill, you know, walk up, sit down glass for a bit, you know.
Yeah.
Just to check it out. But
well, that day we spotted the rams, we never would have spotted them from the valley at all. Like it you know, we had to climb a hill, and it was what did it take? Didn't take an hour. It was probably maybe it took an hour to get up.
Well, we almost got stormed out, so that slowed it down.
Yeah, that was a whole other issue. But when as soon as we got up, it was like the whole place just opened right up to us.
Yeah,
and visually,
I find too every little glassing point that you find gives you a completely different view of things, and you can see into crevices that you couldn't see from the other angle. And I guess the biggest problem is you want to go take a look from that spot over there or that spot over there, but it doesn't look far. But by the time you hike all the way down and all the way back up, it's 2 hours or whatever, and a lot of energy. So
So has there been any good advice that you were given as a new hunter from some old sheep hunters that kind of helped you be successful?
Probably the biggest one was hunt where the sheep are. And when I first was told that, I was like, geez, this is the stupidest thing I've ever...
That's like a Yoda advice.
This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, because obviously you want to hunt where the sheep are. But after I got hunting for a while, what they really meant was, you know, if there's been sheep in this basin before, there's going to be sheep there again. It's just a matter of time. And sheep are going to be where sheep are going to be. And like, you know, the ewes and lambs, you can usually, if there's a little herd of them on a certain hill, you're usually going to be able to find them all the time, or pretty easy to find. But rams, they'll just seem to wander for whatever reason. They just wander. After, you know, I was told that, I was hunting this one spot, I was just religiously hunting it, and I was never seeing a legal ram, but I was seeing some rams, but just not any older rams. And then the one year I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go hunt another spot. A guy I knew went and hunted it and shot a buck ram.
And the one you were just in?
The one that I had religiously hunted year after year, week after week, and then one time I decided I'm going to switch it up. You know, that's when the buck ram showed up. So yeah, like hunt where the sheep are. They will be there. They will come back if they're not there. If you got a good spot anyway, and it's been a known place to produce rams, it'll sooner or later one will come.
So if you found a spot where there's ewes, does that mean rams may eventually go there because it's the same kind of habitat they're looking for? Or
they'll. So what I've found is, like the rams during the non-rut period aren't gonna show up and join up with the ewes.
Right.
But there's certain times of year might swing by, and one that I've found was first thing in the spring. And the only reason I know that is because I had a bunch of trail cameras set up, and some better rams showed up for like a day or two, but then they were gone the rest of the year. And I don't know if it's just they were passing through, or if they're just checking to see who was left, or whatnot. But yeah, they just kind of came and went, and yeah, don't know why don't know why they left or why they came, but
they travel though.
Yeah, they travel. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. You just got to be persistent, and yeah, and I've never seen the ram show up at the same place for a week and stay there. They're always on the
move, feeding around.
Yeah, feeding, and maybe they are there and I just couldn't find them, but I'm fairly confident that they kind of just keep moving around.
Keep moving.
Yeah.
You mentioned persistence there. One piece of advice I heard when I first started out is they said if you want to do it, you kind of got to stick with it, because for a lot of guys, the first sheep you'll get will be born the year you started hunting sheep. Yeah. And talking to a lot of guys, that seems to be the way it is. Like, it takes a long time to...
Yeah, that's not far from the truth. I think the first ram actually pulled the trigger on was the 7th year that I hunted for them. Like, seriously hunted for them. I could have taken two, their younger rams that were legal before that, but I decided to pass on them. I wanted a little older sheep, and you can buy a tag it's not like a once in a lifetime tag here, so you can just get an over the counter one next year and
try
again, and that's a tough thing to do, to pass on a legal ram, especially when you're hoofing it on foot and you've put in so much effort already. But I just like to encourage like new guys to pass the younger rams up if you can possibly do it. But I do understand, that's definitely a tough thing to do.
Yeah. And maybe for the listeners here, like when I've taken guys out before that have just started hunting sheep, I think the biggest thing is when they're asking advice on, is it legal or not?
Yeah.
So maybe could you just explain what is legal in Alberta here, and maybe some tricks or tips you have to determining that in the field? Because I find that even now is a really hard thing to do sometimes.
Yeah. So legal in most units is 4/5, which means the tip of the horn has to come to the front of the eye when it's lined up square with the base. And I think it's 400 that it's full curl. We don't have any units that are any ram, so it's either 4/5 or full curl. And the full curl is basically the tip of the horn is going to be a complete circle or up to the base or the bridge of the nose and whatnot. But for big horn, it's probably going to be a pretty young ram that's full curl, or a absolutely ginormous ancient ram that makes it. You're likely not going to find a 7, 8, 9-year-old sheep that's going to be full curl, just from the brooming and whatnot. So in the genetics, they probably aren't going to make that. But 4/5 is what most guys will be looking for.
Now, do you find it pretty difficult to find that out from the valley, or do you almost have to get up where they are to determine if it's close?
So when you're below looking up, they always look bigger. And when you're above looking down, they always look smaller than they are. The best is if you can be, in my opinion anyway, is if you can be straight across from them. And one of the tips that I was told was, like, for the bighorns we have here in Alberta anyways, is when they start tipping up, they're probably legal. And I've looked at quite a few sheep, and I would say that's probably pretty accurate. But that being said, you don't want to pull the trigger unless you got a 100% certainty that it's gonna make it, because they will crucify you here if you're short. And
and that is a major fine, isn't it?
Yeah, I've heard it's $5,000 for the fine, but I think that's probably discretionary, and it may be higher if they think that you're reckless with it. So when I got my ram, it was an inch past legal, which is like an inch in the horn world. It's like a mile, and they gave me a hard time over it.
Really?
Yeah, and like the short side was right there, and the long side was an inch past, and And
what do you mean they gave you a hard time? Like,
well, the conservation officer that plugged it and was they were confirming that it was a legal ram. He's like, oh, that's what I would call a squeaker, and just like it wasn't like, oh, what a
yeah, they were congratulating.
No,
it was like, you might be in huge trouble. Just let me get my tape measure, kind of thing. Or?
Well, not like, oh, did you know what you were at? Well, they were like, well, did you actually know what you were shooting at, and how did you know it was legal, and did you? And then like, did you take all the meat and things like that, which is legitimate because
they started like they went into cop mode kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's been more than one instance where guys have been backpacking and taken a sheep, and it's how do you carry all that meat, the head, the cape, plus all your backpacking gear out. Well, a lot of guys aren't going to go back for 2 trips. Luckily, when I got mine, I had 2 other guys with me, and we got everything out. So in one trip, so that was
nice.
That was a bonus and whatnot. But
so what's the ideal hunting party size? Would you say 4 is a good party size?
Well, I'd say 4 is big unless 3 of them are not hunting. Ideally,
3 meat haulers.
Yeah, if you're just DIYing it with your buddies, I would say only 1 guy is be the shooter. Like 2 guys probably is ideal. 3 you can do, but I mean, you got to have 2 buddies that are willing to basically not hunt and help the one guy that's going to be the shooter get around and alternate every year, I guess. But it's pretty hard because you work so hard to even get an opportunity to see a legal ram, let alone a shot on one. And then if person A is maybe fidgeting around and person B is like, that's a chip shot for me, but it's not his turn. It's it can get, you got to have the rules figured out before you go. And but I'd say like unless you're real good buddies and you guys have some rules laid out, I'd say just have 1 guy with the tag. The other guy's like basically a support person would be some good advice, especially if you're new to sheep hunting, because you're not likely going to kill 2 rounds. You're probably not going to kill 1. Yeah. But if you did get lucky and get 2, that'd be like I'm going to say it's just pure luck that you did that. So,
yeah. No, we've talked about that lots on this podcast about kind of being on the same playing field and having the same expectations as your hunting partner and having a good set of ground rules.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we've always done is we've basically said whoever spots the animal first, if the 2 of us are out, it's your animal. So it's your animal to be successful with or screw up. But we're not going to cut each other's grass. So I think it's important for if guys are going out in parties of 2 or more, like you say, you got to have that understanding before you go out.
Yeah, and sheep do funny things to guys because they're, elk is one thing. I know guys kind of get a little
passionate
over that too and stuff. But when it comes to sheep, by the time day 7 rolls around, you're pretty like, okay, I want to shoot something myself because I've been working so hard too. I would definitely be like, okay, you leave your tag at home and I'm taking mine, or vice versa. And the guy that's not going to shoot, don't even bring your gun. Like, just come for the trip. And then there's no question about, like, well, I want to shoot or I can do it. And because, even if some hunting parties, even if they do have the ground rules, after that long of a time and how difficult it's been, person B is like, well, I actually found him and I want to shoot him. And in the case where you're sheep hunting, oftentimes you'll both see the glass and see the same ram, and there's only one herd there and you both see it basically the same time, so then who gets to shoot, and then it can cause a lot of hard feelings.
And it has wrecked friendships in the past for sure. Just on that note, have you had any kind of problems with other hunters out in the field that weren't in your party, or even guides in the same area that you were hunting?
After the government started threatening the reg changes, that's kind of when I started running into other guys in the field, because everybody wants to get around before they make it arbitrarily full curl, because getting a full curl bighorn is, you're either shooting a very young one or, like we're saying, like an absolute monster. So basically you're probably not going to get a opportunity at ever getting one, unless you want to find a young one, I guess.
4-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. So the year I actually got my ram, we were like, I think 35K back into the mountain. Like, we were way back there the day before opening day, and found a really nice old like someone got him last week of the season. He ended up being 11 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and big pot belly. He's off on his own. So we had him all kind of found for opening morning. He put him to bed, and back there the next day, 4 other groups of hunters popped over the mountain ridges, and the one guy, he was just like, I don't think he knew really what he was doing, but he just started walking straight towards the thing, and it ran up to the top of the mountain, and then everyone else was skylining themselves and walking around, and I was like, oh, okay, well, we might as well leave, because we're not going to get a sheep with this many people here, first off, and if we do spot one, it's going to be a foot race. So we backed out and actually went quite a bit out of the drainage to one of the more easterly ranges, I guess, and not a single person there. And there was we saw 3 legal rams when I got mine, and then after I got mine, we popped over the hill, and there was another one we hadn't seen, and he was, I think, even older than the one I got. So I was like, oh wow. Man, yeah. Wow. Yeah, it was...
That's a good day.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, that was just luck, too, to come across, just happened to come across them, because that's not where we were expecting them. But that's where they were that day. And
right on.
Yeah, so...
Is that kind of a rookie move that guys go deep in as they can possibly get, or get right up beside a park or something like that? Or?
I don't think it's a rookie move. Like, when you first start out, you think, oh, I gotta get as far away from the parking lot as I can. So I think what has happened over the years is, as people with horses go in, then the backpacker's like, oh, okay, well, they went in 5 kilometers, I gotta go 10. And then as more and more people have moved to the province, like, the hunting pressure's increased, obviously, and then I think people have just naturally pushed each other further and further back. And I know my buddy that got his ram in the Wilmore, they were almost to the BC border, like, they were way back in there.
Wow.
Now, they got away from everybody, but did they have to go that far? Maybe not. But then I started talking to a friend of mine that was a guide, and he said, well, we started... because everybody's trying to go so far deep now, we just started hunting the closer ranges, and no one's there anymore. So
well, that's a good strategy.
Yeah. So, and there's all kinds of old camps there, so people used to hunt it. But it's kind of like if you hunt a prime area, it gets hunted out, everybody moves, and then 5 years later, everyone forgets about it, and one guy goes and tries it, and all the good animals are here again. So, yeah.
Okay.
So we should talk about maybe gear for the sheep hunter. And John and I have touched on this previously in some of our earlier podcasts, but you had mentioned already about the importance of optics.
Yeah.
But if you just had a limited amount of money to spend, where would you point new hunters?
So I'm going to say there's probably 3 key pieces of gear. Number 1 is going to be boots. Like, buy a high-end pair of boots, and I'm not going to say you have to have a Handwag or a Loa or a Scarpa or a Mendel or whatever, but pick one of those brands or those high-end brands that fits your foot properly, and it won't give you blisters, and stick with it, and that will make or break your trip. I've personally run a pair of Handwags, and I've had the same pair of boots now for, I think, 5 years. They're nowhere near being worn out, and I've used them a lot. And I've never had a single blister with them, so they've worked for my feet, and I've just stuck with them. And if I gotta get another pair, I'm gonna buy the exact same pair just because they work so well.
You find the soles last pretty good too, or do you get them resoled, or what do you?
So they've got that Vibrium sole, and it seems to be a pretty hard rubber, and I haven't had them like they're getting worn now, but I'd probably get these ones resoled just because I've kept the leather in pretty good condition and stuff. So
one of our buddies who's going to be sheep hunting with us, he bought a pair of Mammut boots last year, and wore the heck out of them. Like, they're worn, like the soles are almost worn off them already. And so I looked at his soles the other day when we were out, and because I got Scarpas, and they're about the same age as his, and mine are great. Never got blistered. Like, I love them, right?
Yeah.
And mine are, you can tell the sole's starting to wear a little bit, but it's got loads of life in it. They're both Vibram soles.
Yeah, that's like
his are just mush, right? And I don't know. Yeah, so maybe they have different grades of rubber or something. But
I think that Vibram sole is kind of like the high end standard of good mountain boots. Mm-hmm. Like all the good mountain boots I've come across have them. Yeah. But, the boots. So, like, man, if you get blisters and you're 20K back, what are you gonna do? Like,
life is not good.
No, like, how are you gonna get out? Even like, even if you had to leave your gear there, just to walk out at that point is going to be pretty painful experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that'd be my number one piece of gear is the boots. Number two is probably the backpack.
Mm-hmm.
Don't cheap out on that. I think most guys have sheep hunted started off with just some, this will be good enough kind of pack, and you quickly learn that your pack will wear you out.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, if you have perfect boots and you got a bad pack, it will wear you out. Doesn't carry the load properly and whatnot. So
I think you and I talked about backpacks in detail there at the youth sheep camp.
Yeah.
Which ones have you tried, and what has been your favorite?
Which ones have I not tried? So I've had the WaterLily stocks, a couple different Kuyu ones, Mystery Ranch, and I'm on to Kifaru now, and I've got another one that was gifted to me, a tactical 511, just like it almost looks like a kid's school backpack.
Oh, okay.
And I put off using it. That little, it's just like a day pack, I guess, but I put off using it, and then I was on like some smaller trip, and I used it, and I was like, man, this is like one of the best fitting packs I've ever put on. I wish I was using this way before. It just doesn't hold a whole lot, so it's limited for what I can take it on. But if you're on like a day trip or something, that's pretty nice. But it doesn't have an internal or an external frame. I think it's got like a hard plate in the back, so it carries the weight a little better. But for the other packs, the WaterLily stock I think it was the Phantom, and for me anyway, the harness was terrible. Like, it was soft. It wasn't like that pack wore me out. I loved the bag, but it just wasn't working. And then when I got to the Kuyu, they weren't bad. The material was a little bit light for, like, it was a lightweight pack obviously, but I did wear the pockets out on that on like one trip, and then the ones I had the pivoting waist belt in it, and that didn't do well when you had a full load on. So I the smaller pack and the bigger pack I had with that pivoting waist belt, they were fine when you had 50 pounds or less, but once you had all your gear plus sheep in it, or meat or whatnot, and it got a bit top heavy, that pivot in the waist belt, the weight would kind of push the pack over the pivot point, and it just about threw me down the hill more than once. So I kind of decided I didn't really like that or whatever. So then I tried the Mystery Ranch, and that was a really good pack. I think it was the Marshall pack I had. There was nothing wrong with it at all, but I was like, I'll keep being told these Kifarus are good, so I thought I'll sell that one and try a Kifaru, and the Kifaru one's the one I stuck with now or whatever, and I really like the harness on it. It just fits me perfect. It's like and with the Kifaru you can order the harness and the waist belt independently, so it fits you pretty much like you just tell them what your measurements are, and you can get the pretty much the exact right fit for you. And then the waist belt sits on your hips. It carries a lot more load, I find, too. So I really like that bag, actually, right now.
Can you change the bag out too? Like, you got the frame and the harness and the bag, and
that Kifaru that I got now, it'll actually you can change that. It's probably the easiest one I've found for external frame packs to change all the bags out. And it'll even take the competitors' bags and fit on there too. Wow. So that's the other thing I really liked about it, was like you can actually put a Kuyu bag on it and strap it on there, and a couple others, and use them if you like the different brands' bags. And some of the other packs I've had, they advertise it as interchangeable bags, but man, if you ever took the original bag off, you'd never figure out how to put it back on.
Exactly.
But that Kifaru, it's pretty straightforward. And then, so those are all kind of, I'm going to say, modern packs. But I've got kind of like an old school one too, or like an old school design one, like the Barney's pack. If anyone's familiar with those, there's like an external frame pack. It's kind of like what they used to use back in the day, but they're making them new, and get them from Barney's Sport Chili in Alaska there. But they're expensive, but like you can carry like a moose quarter out on them, and the padding's so thick. Like the biggest problem with those Barney's packs I found was you carry more weight than you probably should.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So my buddy and I were in Alaska, and we had the Barney's packs, and we got a double header on a couple sheep, and then we had our full camp, so we had like basically 50 pounds of gear plus our animal, and the guide was carrying some stuff out too, but my pack was so heavy that I actually had to have the guide and the guy I was hunting with grab the sides of me and get me to my feet. I couldn't actually get up on my feet. It was so heavy, but once I got up, it didn't feel bad at all. And then but I paid for that after, though.
I guess.
Sore for a couple of days?
Yeah, and just you don't decompress like your back doesn't decompress like it should, I guess, after you carry that kind of weight. But so that was the biggest drawback of that Barney's, I think, was you could just overcarry your capacity, but it was a great pack too. So
right on. One thing worth mentioning too, and like we've had this talk before about talking about equipment. I'm getting anal with it now, and I even got like a checklist with all the weights.
Yeah.
But I think, and I myself included, you can fall into the trap of trying to go too late, and then you take away some functionality.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, and what's your list look like?
It's funny you mentioned the list, because I when I was first starting out, I'd always hear about these guys with these lists, and I was like, why are they got lit? Like, that's crazy, just... And then now it's like I've got a list of everything I might possibly bring, and then I'm going to do this particular hunt, so I'll take that list and pare down the stuff I don't need, and then I got the checklist of the stuff I'm bringing for that specific trip, and I just find it's quicker packing at home is why I do it. And
you don't get out there and I forgot this.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the other thing I'm doing now too is just like with the pull sacks, I'm even putting like pull sack number or stuff sack number 1. Maybe that's got your cooking gear and your utensils and whatever in it. So on my list, it'll be like, okay, pull sack 1's got this stuff. So when I go to pack, I just grab bag 1, 2, and 3, and I know I'm set. So just that way you just don't forget anything.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
So I started doing that, I guess. But but what you're saying about
just being functional,
getting too crazy with the lightweight, there is definitely a point. Like even with the rifles, like guys spend say $4,000 on a custom gun, get it, machined to the point where it's like you can't take more than one shot because the barrel's so hot that the next shot's 6 inches off and stuff like that. So there's definitely a point of diminishing returns.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find too, even with those lightweight rifles, like there's a whole different way to shoot them compared to your typical.
Yeah, and like I got a Seiko Finlight, which was basically everything I was ever going to get done with a custom anyway. Like there's a few more things you could do to make it up to what a full custom probably would be, but even with that, and it's only a 25-06, I found the kick was like unbelievably heavy for that caliber. Mm-hmm. And then like I've got a 270 just with a regular wood stock and stuff, which you would think would kick a lot harder than that 25-06, and it's way less. So definitely, you gotta know yourself as a shooter. Like, is it worth taking a lightweight rifle if you can't shoot it? Probably not. Yeah. And like you say, a lot of guys get really concerned with that, but then it's a totally different way to shoot. So, and then you get into flinching, and then you might as well not bother pulling.
Throw the towel in.
Yeah.
So we talked about boots and then backpacks, and then you were mentioning number 3.
Yeah, number 3 is probably a tent or some kind of shelter. So I've experimented with a few things from like say Canadian Tire $30 tents. I was like, well, what's if it gets wrecked, then I don't care, because why would I spend $400 on a tent just to save 6 ounces? And then I've tried the like those tarps that are meant to set up as a little tent, and I found those didn't work, or weren't as easy to set up, and didn't work as well
as planned.
As planned, yeah. I got it like the first time I ever tried it. Actually, we ended up with like it was nice and sunny August day, and then there was a blizzard overnight, and I mean, man, that was a train wreck there. So quit using those tarps for my planned shelter. Like 9 times out of 10 probably fine, but what I found to be the best tent that I've used to date has been those Hillebergs.
Okay.
Yeah, my one friend and I were on top of a mountain, like 100-mile-an-hour winds, and that thing was like not going anywhere. It was not ripping. It wasn't flapping around. It was pretty good tent, and I think the MSRs and Marmots and a couple of those other brands are pretty good too.
Mm-hmm. Now, was it a single wall tent?
They called it a 3-season, but it was basically like, I'm gonna say like a regular tent with like the bug screen vent slash on the top, and then it had like rain slash wind fly over top, so it was they call it a 3-season, but
okay.
I don't know if you call it double wall with like the way it was set up or not. But
yeah, and the reason I bring it up, like John and I have been brainstorming about what we're going to do this year, and with us having a late September, early October hunt, we were actually talking about rolling the dice and going with bivy bags and a tarp like you mentioned. But we've been out there when it's been miserable. And last year I experimented with my first single wall tent in the late season, and it didn't go well.
Oh, okay.
Like, it was pretty bad, and I tried everything I could do to control the condensation just by increasing ventilation, like leaving my rain fly open, making sure the vents that I did have were unobstructed by my sleeping bag and all that.
Did you have the vent at the top of the
Yeah, there was a vent at the bottom that was right near your toes, and you had to be careful because if you scooch too far down in the tent, you would block it with your sleeping bag.
Oh, yeah.
So I made sure I stayed up. And then the vent above my head, I made sure I had wide open and had stretched it outside with sticks and, strings to make sure I had lots of ventilation. And the first night I woke up soaked in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
And so the second day it had a rain fly on the outside, and there was a mesh right beside me. So I opened the rain fly and kind of strung it out so the moisture could get out. But I just fought with it the whole week.
Yeah,
so
see that Hilleberg we had, and it was late September, so it was like freezing at night slightly, so we were getting a lot of those temperature changes. And there was a little bit of condensation on the roof, but not enough to drip on you. Mm-hmm. So it worked pretty well. But yeah, like if you can't be getting wet.
No, especially in down sleeping bags.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I got a tent that I've used for years, and it's nothing fancy, and it's an older one, but it's like you were saying, a 3-season.
Yeah.
But we found kind of what it does is as you're breathing at night, like you're filling it with moisture essentially.
Yeah.
It's going up, but it seems to go through that mesh and then condense on your rain fly.
On the fly and then probably drip down.
And drip down, and I think even if it doesn't drip down, if something is going to drip towards you, it drips on the mesh and stays there. It doesn't soak your sleeping bag. So I think that's what I'm going to be leaning towards this year.
Yeah. No, I really like that Hilleberg. It was probably the best backpacking tent I've tried anyway, but they're pretty spendy too. So and if you're a new guy just starting out on the sheep hunting and don't know if you're going to do it twice, it's probably not the first thing that you want to buy the first season or whatever. Like the boots you can use for anything, the backpack you can use, but if you're being budget conscious, it's probably start out maybe with a cheaper tent, and you can get by without a fancy tent or whatever. It's just not as comfortable. And
I think we've learned too that kind of like Mother Nature can throw anything at you.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of it, you just got to accept the fact that for some of those trips, you're going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to be like you're at home sleeping in bed kind of thing.
And that's that's probably 9/10 of sheep hunting is like that mental toughness. Yeah. And once you accept being cold and being hungry and once you learn how to be uncomfortable, then you are comfortable.
Yeah.
And if you're not comfortable, you're not going to find a sheep, because sitting at the top of the mountain, freezing and being wet and hungry, like you're not concentrating on finding anything, and you're not having fun at that point.
Yeah.
But that is a big part of sheep hunting, is being miserable, for lack of a better word, miserable and cold and stuff.
We always kind of laughed about it. I remember the one trip there, I was out with Lauren and Doug, and it was one of those trips where it started off nice and then we got dumped on with snow.
Yeah.
And we all had our boots outside the tent under the fly, and we were hiking around in a little bit of snow that previous day, and so got them soaked. And then, of course, they froze overnight. So there we are in the morning, and we had a crappy night's sleep. We all got bags under our eyes. And I'm beside Doug in the tent, and we're both putting our frozen boots on. And I think it took me about 10 minutes to put my boots on that morning.
Oh, yeah.
And Doug just kind of looks over. He's like, this isn't for everybody. This is pretty hardcore. He goes, there's not too many friends you could convince to do a trip like this. And at the time, you're thinking, like, this sucks. But it's stuff we still talk about years down the road.
Yeah, so it's always...
It builds memories.
Yeah, I find, even if when you... Like, I read a lot of sheep hunting books, and it's always romanticized. And it doesn't matter if it's in the Sonora Desert or in Alaska or BC or Alberta, wherever the story is, it's always like you're watching a movie and everything's great, but it's really, 9 hours of suffering for 1 hour of glory kind of idea. So but afterwards, man, what a sense of accomplishment though, like if you can actually get it done.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's quite a high, I guess. So
yeah. So again, as always, if you have anything you'd like to suggest, you can email us at highlanderhuntingpodcast@gmail.com. Go to our Facebook page, make a comment. Really appreciate all the feedback we've been getting, and make suggestions.